We're talking about SURRATT Beauty today. It's one of my favorite beauty brands, and this is my first brand review of 2024. If you're new here, then hi, my name is Becca. I like to do these in-depth brand reviews. They're videos that take me quite a while because I like to review everything that I've tried from a product. That means it takes time for me to purchase or acquire items. It takes time for me to test things so I can give you the best review that I possibly can. And these brand reviews are never sponsored, though I have received some of these items in PR with no obligation to post about them or talk about them in any sort of way. But I also have a mix of things here that I've purchased as well. I am wearing a full face of SURRATT Beauty. It's the only brand that I'm wearing. I have reviews from every category, although not every single product from the line. Everything except for eyebrows, I should say. So you're going to see cutaways of how I use the products, best application methods, and you're gonna get to really see each product in detail. I will have every category time-stamped below, as well as links to everything I'm talking about. I do also have an affiliate code with SURRATT Beauty, so it's Becca15 for 15% off. Again, not an ad, no pressure to use it at all. Just want to share that in case anything here catches your attention. A little bit of brand background. SURRATT is named after its founder, Troy Surratt, who is an incredible makeup artist. I love his sensibility. I love his aesthetic. The brand itself is an American brand, and I think they're very inspired by like New York aesthetics, but it's also very much inspired by Japanese approaches, craftsmanship. So you're going to see that as I'm showing you the products in terms of their finishes, the kinds of textures that they use in the brand, as well as the craftsmanship of some of the products. They are luxury products reflected in luxury prices, but to me, this is one of the brands where, for the most part, I can safely say that if you try something from SURRATT, you're going to feel the quality, especially in the color products as well as the brushes. Let's start with face. I don't actually have the SURRATT primer. They do have a primer in the line, so I just used my regular skincare, and I went in with their one foundation that I do have, and it's a long time favorite of mine. It's the Dewdrop foundation. Dewdrop is such a unique foundation. So the brand describes this as a light to medium coverage foundation that is hydrating. They say it's natural, seamless, lightweight, and they say it has a dewy, hydrating finish. To me, what is so special about this foundation is that a little bit goes a really long way. So for my full face, I think I used maybe 4 to 5 drops, and I applied this half with fingers, which is my favorite way to apply it, and I applied this half with a brush, which I'll talk about in a second. What is so special about this formula is how stretchy it is. A little bit goes a really long way, and even though they describe it as a light to medium finish, I would actually say it's about a medium coverage. It's very buildable. You would actually be surprised how it perfects the skin while still looking like skin. I have a combo oily skin type, so I'm always very wary about foundations that claim to be radiant. This is one of those foundations that somehow really works for my skin. It doesn't break up throughout the day. It doesn't get cakey. It doesn't get greasy. It also does an amazing job of blurring the pores. This foundation, you'll see, especially when I apply it with fingers, I think the warmth of the fingers really melts the product into like the natural texture of the skin, and it just makes my skin look so smooth every single time I use it. So for me, that's my preferred method of application. You can certainly use a brush, and this is the SURRATT foundation brush. I would say with a brush, you actually get a sheerer finish than you do with fingers, and especially with this brush, because it's not a super dense brush. It's not going to pack on coverage. In terms of packaging, it has a pretty unique component. So it comes in this dropper system. So the top of it actually has like a dropper squeezy tip. The bottom, you have this little button, so you push to dispense product. And I would would say just start with 1 or 2 drops. You're going to be really surprised how beautifully this spreads, and you don't need a lot. Now let's talk about the shade range, because this is where things can get a little bit confusing, and I've had trouble as a consumer in the past. So there are 20 shades in this range, and they do range from fair to very deep. There are definitely jumps in range. What's confusing about this is that the shades are numbered 1 through 18. So there are some half numbers, and the shades don't always go from lightest to deepest. For example, I think, when you look at the swatches, shade number 10 might be lighter than shade number 8. It's a little bit confusing, and I would highly recommend either trying to get samples or swatching this in store, or looking up swatches online if you can. They do have undertone descriptions that I do think are helpful, and I align with their neutral to yellow, like golden undertones in this range. What I am wearing is a mix of shade 5 and shade 8. To me, that is the closest match. I don't have an exact match in this range that I've tried yet. And I only do that with foundations that I really, really love. Their other foundation is their Surreal Skin foundation, and it's the foundation that has the brush tip attached to it. Let's talk about the Artistique foundation brush. Their brushes are stunning. So a little bit about the SURRATT brushes. They are all made in Japan in the Fude brush tradition. They do have some brushes like this one that are a mix of natural and synthetic fibers, but they also have brushes that are just natural bristle, and they are luxury brushes, and they're very, very beautiful. I don't think every makeup brand makes great brushes, but SURRATT is really invested in the artistry of their brushes, and if you like Fude brushes like me, you will probably have heard about these already. So this is a mix of natural and synthetic bristles. It's cut at an angle, and their ferrule and their handle have the same packaging, so it starts matte and it fades into this like gunmetal sort of shade. It has the SURRATT logo, and this is a duo fiber brush. So even though it's cut at an angle, there are 2 different types of bristles that comprise this brush, and that's just to give you a more seamless finish. A lot of foundation brushes are done this way just because that mix of synthetic can help with the blend. I really love this foundation brush because, first of all, it's very soft, but it's the right blend of stiffness and give. Some foundation brushes like this can be so tightly packed that it feels like you're just banging on your face with something solid. This doesn't feel that way. It has just enough give, but it also gives you, just enough density to blend, but it's not so dense that it's really harsh on the face. I also like this because really, really densely packed foundation brushes that feel hard actually give you more coverage. So the more dense your brush, the higher the coverage, because it's absorbing less product, it's sweeping less product around, you're just kind of moving it around. This one does actually work it into the skin, and I find it gives me a really good medium finish without ever over applying or looking streaky. So this one is $95. It's a beautiful brush. It's not my favorite brush of the line. I will get to those, but I don't think you'll be disappointed by it if you are a fan of Fude brushes, and also if you've never used Fude brushes or natural bristle brushes. You'll be shocked at how differently your makeup goes on with a high quality tool. And Troy SURRATT is a makeup artist, so he knows his tools. Moving on to concealers, there are 3 different concealers in the SURRATT line, and I have 2 of them. The most recent release I actually got to work with them on, and it is their Dewdrop Concealer. It's the sister product to the Dewdrop Foundation. I also just have to say I love the aesthetic of SURRATT's packaging. Like, they've had this beautiful metallic duochrome packaging for a long time. It's very minimal, but it's edgy and sleek at the same time. So if you care about luxury beauty and luxury packaging, I just wanted to mention that. Okay, back to the Dewdrop Concealer. This is $48. It comes in 9 shades, and I would love to see more shades in this range. I have 3 different shades. I have 3, 4, and 5. I use them all for different purposes, and they all have different undertones. 3 is a light peach, 4 is a warm peach, and 5 is described as a light tan. You can see there's quite a jump in depth from shade 4 to shade 5. So that's where I would love to see the brand eventually sort of fill in the gaps, because there are quite a few shades where you see a jump in depth. And I get it, if you're going to release 9 shades, you want them to be equitably distributed, you want them to cover, a wide range of skin tones, but that means that there are some gaps. I think for me, my perfect shade would actually exist right between 4 and 5. I use shade 4 around the eyes because it is a warm peach, so it has a slight color correcting ability. The thing about this concealer is it's described as a creamy, hydrating, buildable concealer. In my opinion, it's actually very much a satin finish. It's creamy and it's beautiful. It's very, very thin. So even though it comes in this like spongy tube, I just take a couple of drops around the eyes and a little bit goes a really long way. I take a brush, which I'll talk about in a second, and you can see I'm able to literally just paint it across my under eye, and it's super smoothing. It glides over any fine lines, it glides over any imperfections, texture, and it makes the skin look so smooth, similarly to how the Dewdrop foundation does. However, in my opinion, the finishes are different. I honestly don't even need to set this concealer. It has a beautiful satin finish. It's not like a dry, cakey matte. It just gives me a really nice skin-like finish, and it also really, really sticks to the skin. When I think of a creamy concealer, I think of something that moves around or may move around. This one doesn't do that. It actually stays put exactly where you put it. That's something that I really love about it. If I were to use this all around my face, I actually think a mix of 3 and 5 makes my ideal shade. Again, I don't have the perfect skin shade, like my regular face shade in this range. Again, I don't mind because I like this concealer so much that I am willing to mix shades, but I do have to mention that in the review. Now, I do have to say, I don't love anything really with a sponge tip applicator. In fact, if we just abolish the sponge tip applicator in cosmetics altogether, I wouldn't be mad about it. The other concealer that I used is their Surreal Skin Concealer, and this is a stick concealer, and they call it their full coverage concealer with a skin-like finish. I don't know if I would describe it as entirely full coverage. I think it does have a beautiful skin-like finish. A lot of stick concealers can be a little bit too creamy or too waxy. This is right in between, and it does set to a natural skin finish. It's not mattifying, it's not powdery, it's not greasy, it's just something right in between. But I wouldn't call the finish entirely full coverage. I think it's like a medium full coverage. This is $50 and it comes in 8 shades, and I don't think the 8th shade, like the deepest shade, is very deep. I have the shade 3, which is light with neutral undertones, and it's honestly not my best match for around my face. I think I could go up to shade 4 for something with more golden undertones. This actually looks a little bit peachy on me, but it is a concealer that actually I can use around my eyes and face. I prefer the Dewdrop concealer around my eyes, but in a pinch, if I only had this, I would be happy to use it around my eyes because as I'm applying, it actually sort of melts onto the skin. So it has enough spreadability that it still looks very natural and skin-like, and it won't look cakey around the eyes either. For concealer work, there are 2 concealer brushes in the SURRATT line. There's a large irregular shaped complexion concealer brush, and there's a mini concealer brush. These are squirrel fibers, and this tiny one is amazing for little baby detail work. So when I'm spot concealing, I like to go in with this because it gives me so much control in where I'm laying down pigment and how. So the best way to spot conceal is to only use high coverage exactly where you need it rather than concealing your whole face. This is great for that kind of work. It's also great for like inner corner, if you want to do any detail work around the eyes, it's a great brush for that. They also do have a concealer brush. I don't have the larger concealer brush, but I actually used one of their shader brushes, and it's pretty similar to their concealer brush, but it is slightly smaller in size. So their shader brush that I have is their Artistique Classique shadow brush. It's a beautiful brush. It's also squirrel fiber numbers. It is really good. This kind of flat paddle shape is really good for that dewdrop concealer application because I'm able to really almost paint the product on in a very thin layer rather than using a fluffy concealer brush that I might use for something with rather than using a fluffy concealer brush, which might make me lose coverage. I would really love to try their complexion concealer brush because it is, I think, sable hair, so I'm sure the performance is slightly different, but just for reference, their shader brush is $54. So that is it for base. I don't have their loose powder. They do have a loose powder in the range. I just haven't tried it, so can't speak to that one. I'm going to move on to cheeks. Now for this look, I packed on as many cheek products as I could, so I'm going to talk about all of them in the order of application, starting with liquids. So first up are their Artistique liquid blushes. These come in 4 shades. I have 2 of them here, and they're $45. I have the shade Parfait as well as Cantaloupe. Parfait on my cheeks is a beautiful fresh pink, and Cantaloupe is this warm undertone melon. For me, this is a classic example of love the formula, hate the packaging. It's another twist up product with a sponge tip applicator. However, I find the formula and the packaging don't get along very well. It's almost like I can twist and twist and twist and I don't get a lot of product. It comes up through this hole. Or sometimes I get a big glob of product. So I don't love the lack of control with this product. I would rather it just come in a squeezy tube or something with a pump. Now this formula is a gel formula. So this isn't uber pigmented like your Glossier Cloud Paint. It's not like your Rare Beauty liquid blush. This is a beautiful sheer gel. It's on the thinner side, and I find that it actually feels sort of wet to touch, but then it sets down and it doesn't move around. And that's something that's really unique about this formula for a liquid blush. It's not emollient. It's not like a thick cream. It's actually very thin going on, and then it actually does set down. Both of these shades do have a slight pearl running through them. I wouldn't call them glittery by any means. They just lend your skin a nice radiance and luminosity. For me, the best method of application is actually applying it to the back of my hand, picking it up with a brush that way, and then applying it. I find that one of the things I was worried about with this method of application was streakiness, but I don't get any streakiness. I also think it's a great liquid blush for a lot of different skin types because it's not emollient or greasy, it doesn't slide around, and it does set down on its own. My one critique of this product, aside from the packaging, just formula-wise, is that they are not uber pigmented products, which for me is great because I have a light medium skin tone, but I don't know how well these would show up on deeper skin tones or how much you would have to build up, like how much product you would have to use. I do have 2 of the lighter shades in the line. I know there is one more richly saturated shade, like a deeper berry. I haven't tried that one, so I can't speak to it, but I do want to mention that just because that's something that I was thinking about as I was applying and kind of taking mental notes for this review. I haven't seen this on deeper skin tones, so I can't speak to that. Moving on to bronzers, this is a release that came out last year, and I have their Artistique bronzer. This is a powder bronzer. It comes in 2 shades, only 2 shades, and I do wish there were more shades because these are both medium toned bronzers. I have Soleil Dew, which is a neutral undertone, and that's what I'm wearing. It's more of a golden undertone. And then they have Soleil Clair, which is a warmer undertone, and you can see it has a sort of peachiness to it. Now, we have to talk about SURRATT's color powder products. To me, anything powder in the collection, their eyeshadows, their cheek products are such a standout. They're made using what they call a Japanese slurry method. So basically it starts out as a liquid and they mix it all together and then it sort of sets on its own. And as they dry, they turn to powder. And it's the most beautiful, refined, skin-like formula. They don't pick up powdery at all. And something about the quality of the pigments they use and the refinement of the formula means that they go on and they blend like a dream. There's truly no other powder formula that I can compare exactly to the SURRATT powder formula. The bronzer is a matte bronzer and I can build it up gradually. I can really cake it on without it ever looking overdone or or powdery. It just looks like skin, and you can see, even though it's matte, because it melts into the skin, it becomes so skin-like that it takes on the finish of natural skin. Onto the Artistique blushes. This is the powder blush formula. There are 16 shades of this in lots of different finishes, and they are $32. And within this range, blushes kind of refers to highlighters and blushes and some more bronzer shades, which I'll show you. Because SURRATT is artistry based, a lot of their products are mix and match, and you can create your own palettes. So the blushes are all sold separately. You can also buy them in sets, and then you can get the compact separately, so you can make your own trio, as I've done here. If you get the blushes individually, they look like this, and you don't need a separate compact for this necessarily. This is the shade Brillant Idée. It's an incredible, like, bright coral, but they do come with their own case if you want to keep the blush individually this way. Or you can mix and match each palette with their eyeshadows, which I'll show you in a little bit. I am wearing all three of these shades on my cheeks, layered on top of the Artistique liquid blush and on top of the bronzer. So this is the shade Coup de Génie. It's a beautiful peachy highlighter. These are all made with the Japanese slurry recipe. Then I have the shade Cherubique, which is a shimmery, cool-toned pink. And on bottom, I have the shade Chaleur, which is actually a matte blush. On me, this makes a beautiful bronzer shade. So I used Coup de Génie as a highlighter, and then I used Cherubique towards the apple of my cheeks, and then I used Chaleur more towards the back of my cheeks, blending into the bronzer for a very dimensional cheek look. I mean, I typically would not wear all of these at once, but I wanted to be able to show you what they look like. Now, this is one of the few powder highlighters that I still wear. I honestly only go for liquid illuminators usually these days, but this is a powder highlighter that it looks so refined. It reflects back light, not in a metallic way, but in this beautiful, luminous, skin-like way. And the thing about this slurry formula, like I mentioned, is that when you apply it, it kind of becomes one with the skin. Same thing with the Cherubique blush. If you like a pop of pink, this is stunning. It's slightly cool toned on me, but I think it's pretty like cool tone neutral leaning rose, but it just gives you the most youthful flush across the cheeks. These do have a pearl running through them, you will see it, but because of the formula and how refined it is, it doesn't look glittery on the cheeks. It, again, just reflects back light across the apple of the cheeks in the most beautiful way. Chaleur is a shade that is so easy to use. It's a one and done cheek shade for me. If I'm in a rush, I could use just some concealer, Chaleur across the cheeks, the brows, the eyes, and just throw on some lip gloss, and I would be totally fine with that. It's such an easy shade to use. For me, the powder cheek formulas are really, really special, and they're a great place to start if you want to dip your toe into the brand. In terms of cheek brushes, these are absolutely stunning. If you're gonna buy any of the SURRATT brushes, I think it should be their cheek brushes. They're expensive. So I have the Artistique cheek brush, and this is $130. If you are new to the world of Fude Beauty, that might sound shocking, but Fude Beauty or Fude brushes are all handmade. It's an artisan trade. They are all hand wrapped and handmade. Every single one of these. So it's very much a craft and it's a skill. So the Artistique cheek brush to me is probably the most versatile of their cheek brushes. It has a beautiful fluffiness to it. This is a gray squirrel and it's so soft. Nothing will give you the blend that this brush does because it is so soft. You can actually really buff the powder products into the skin. So I use this for highlighter and blush, and I could even use this for bronzer if I wanted to. And the thing is, I can really work in small circles, and that will sort of polish the product and bring out the shine in those blushes and really make them one with the skin. I love this brush. It is truly a cherished brush in my collection of many, many brushes. This one is their Artistique sculpting brush, and it's $125. It's a little bit different because it's angled like this. It's slightly pinched, and this one is really good for sculpting. It's great for bronzer. If you wear contour, it's amazing for that. It really fits in the hollows of the cheeks. I use this for my bronzer today. This one is also incredibly soft, and it does beautiful work of blending and building up pigment slowly. It's a little bit stiffer than their Artistique cheek brush. This one is pure squirrel. This one is actually squirrel and goat. So there's a mix of different fibers in there that gives it a bit more stiffness, which I think is actually good for blending out contour and bronzer and building up a little bit more pigment where you want a little bit more stiffness in the brush itself. Let's move on to eyes, and let's talk about the Artistique eyeshadow formula. So the SURRATT powder eyeshadow formula is also absolutely stunning. It's created using the Japanese slurry technique, and their powder eyeshadow formula comes in many different finishes. So there are mattes, satins, there are more metallics, there are more kind of sparkly, twinkly shades. I only have 3 of the shades. I want more though, because I think it's such a special powder eyeshadow formula. These are each sold separately, and you can see I have like a quad palette. And when you purchase each of the eyeshadows individually, they come with a little plastic cover like this, but then you can take the cover off and pop them into the palettes. So here are the shades I have. This matte shade I have is called Poudre, and it's a matte soft pink. Honestly, on me, it doesn't really show up, so I don't recommend that if you're around my skin tone. My favorite shade is this shade, which is called Zibelline. They call this a satin shimmer shimmering taupe, and I do agree with that. It has much more complexity than that, however, and I think it shimmers more than it is satin exactly. And then the last shade I have is called Haute Chocolat, and it is a satin glowing rich brown. I laid down a base of Poudre as just kind of a matte base. Again, doesn't do much. And then I used Zibelline across the entire lid, really. And then I used Haute Chocolat to deepen up and warm up the outer corners. But you'll see that these like the first layer of eyeshadow you put on, you're like, okay, it's pretty. The more you layer it on, the more of that refined pearl builds on your eye. And then you suddenly end up with a very dimensional look. It's the weirdest thing, and they almost, like at least these two, almost have like a duochrome quality to them. And I don't mean that in the sense of like, whoa, crazy multichrome. What I mean by that is that the light catches your eye and it might catch the shadow at different angles, and it might make it look as though you're wearing more than one eyeshadow. It's hard to describe, but they're so special and absolutely stunning. I had heard people talk about these for years before I tried them, and I didn't really get it because I'm like, we've all tried a million eyeshadow formulas. But these go on thin. They're so thin. That's the thing too. They're not like a creamy emollient eyeshadow. They go on thin, they build, and then all of a sudden the magic happens. And it does look like almost like satin, like the fabric or silk, or the way that these really beautiful fabrics reflect back light. These eyeshadows have that dimensionality. Again, this is a great place to start if you're curious about the SURRATT line. And I think especially the satins and the metallics in their eyeshadow line, they're just incredible. Their most recent launch of their Soufflé eyeshadows has been a really confusing launch for me, I'm not gonna lie. They call this a rich, bouncy shadow with long-wearing color and dynamic shimmer. I reviewed these a couple of months ago when they first released, and I really didn't love them. They've grown on me more since then, but I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about these. So it comes in 6 shades. They're $48. And the thing about this is it's a water-based gel, bouncy gel eyeshadow. Since filming that video, I have learned that these are best applied with fingers. They don't really work well with a brush, and you can see the bounce. Like, I've dipped into this eyeshadow many times. It just kind of springs back in form. And the best way to use these is as a one and done eyeshadow work them on your finger, and then blend them out across the eyes. They don't really play well with brushes. And once they set down, they actually really set down. So in that regard, they're a really good carrier for the shimmer that runs through them. This shade, Pluie Mauve, has a duochrome shift to it. So there's a purpley base with a blue shimmer. Matin Vert is a really beautiful smoky green with like a grungy copper running through it. And Gris Doux is a nice smoky taupe. These do have a chunkier glitter running through them. That's kind of the point. They're supposed to be more of a statement eyeshadow. And I will say that once they set down, they really set down. And they are unique in that they're kind of sheer, bouncy, water-based glittery eyeshadows. I haven't really tried anything else like this. However, I don't think I like them more than my other go-to one and done shadows or statement eyeshadows. I just don't think I love the texture. I know some people do, like I've heard Stephanie say how much she loves them, Beauty Unhyped on Instagram. And I know friends that really love this formula, but for me, it's definitely not more special than their powder eyeshadow formula. So that's just my opinion, but that's where my tastes are in terms of their eyeshadow formulas. For eye brushes, I've already talked about the shader brush. It's amazing for packing on color. I use this for, I think, the Zibeline and the Haute Chocolat eyeshadows. It's amazing because it's good at packing on color as well as blending out. They also have a couple of eye brushes that are called their smoky eye brushes, the Artistique smoky eye brushes. This one is the medium size, but there's a grande and a petite. And you'll see that these are all very soft eyeshadow brushes that have quite long bristles and they're cut at an angle. This is really interesting because you can actually lay it on its side flat against the eye and you can use it to blend out a look, and it is totally effortless. It feels like just a whisper across the eyes. They're incredibly soft and it blends out, especially things like the outer corner, with little to no effort. You don't have to press down. You don't even have to move the brush around very much. When you lay it down flat on its side, the way that it's cut on an angle like that, it does all of the blending work for you. I think the very first SURRATT product I ever purchased was their liquid eyeliner, and it remains one of my favorite products from the line. It's called the Autographique liner. It comes in 4 shades. I have the brown and the black. Even though I don't really use liquid liner much these days, when I do, this is what I reach for. One of the most attractive things to me about this is that it's a brush tip eyeliner, and the brush tip itself is super fine. It gives you a lot of control. The ink doesn't bleed, it doesn't skip, and it's such a fine tip that I can even use this to like line between my lashes and the ink won't get everywhere. It is so refined in the craftsmanship of the brush tip itself. The other thing I love about this is that it is a refillable eyeliner. So much like refilling a pen, and I feel like this is very Asian, Japanese stationery. You remove the body of the liner, and this is the ink cartridge right here. You just pop that out, purchase another ink cartridge, and pop it back in. The thing is, you can also wash the tip of the brush, so you can sanitize it, you can wash it as needed if you feel like, you ever want to refresh it. It's very easy to do, and the brush holds its shape. So my brown shade, which I've had for 6 years maybe, I've actually gone through several ink cartridges, but the ink tip or the brush tip has remained just as sharp, just as fine, just as refined, and just as stiff as it was the day that I got it. The black shade is a great inky rich black. I actually love their brown shade even more. And the reason I love it is that it's a warm brown and it's not too dark. It's not like a smoky brown. It actually really warms up around brown eyes, especially. That's why I got it, because it's much softer and more forgiving and more flattering on me than a black eyeliner. Of course, there are times where you just want a black liquid liner for that extreme definition, but on most days, if I reach for a liquid liner, I reach for this. Honestly, for several years there, I wore a brown liquid liner every single day, and it was always this one. The SURRATT Lash Curler is a cult favorite for good reason. So it's this beautiful matte metal. It just feels good in the hand. What's unique about this lash curler is that it's very flat. You know, a lot of lash curlers are very curled or very rounded, and because this is flat, it actually allows you to get really, really close to your lash line so that you can get that curl all the way through to the root of your lashes. If you're Asian, if you have a flatter eye shape or smaller eyes, or maybe just other lash curlers don't work for you, I really think this is worth a shot because it's such a unique shape. I haven't encountered other lash curlers that have this exact shape, and I've tried many lash curlers in my life. And then I have one of my most perfect mascaras. So if you followed me for any amount of time, you will know I live for the SURRATT Noir Lash Tint. It has this really interesting coil wand. It's metal, and it looks like a screw. Like it looks like the screw that you screw into your wall. You would look at this and think, how is this going to apply my mascara? But something about this allows me to build product very slowly and build a really, really fluttery, lengthened, super defined lash. Your lashes will not clump together, they won't stick together, and this is such a buildable formula. It's also very, very black in pigment, so it's really defining, and it does not smudge. It's so long lasting. It is a water resistant formula, so it does take an oil-based cleanser to remove at the end of the day, but it's also one of the only mascara formulas that actually holds a curl on my very, very straight, very, very stubborn, fine lashes. I can't say that about 99.9% of the mascara formulas out there. You guys know I always use a mascara primer, not with this one. And today I haven't used a primer. It doesn't drop a curl, it stays all day long. It's honestly my perfect mascara. Moving on to lips, SURRATT has 4 different lip categories. So they have the Lip Sleek, which I'm going to talk about, which is like a sheer lipstick. They describe this as lighter than a lipstick, but less shiny than a lip gloss. And I do agree. It's a sheer tinted lip product. And if you like those kinds of products, you will love this. So this is a click up format. I have 3 different shades. The one I'm wearing now, which is Heaven. I'll actually retouch this. There's also no scent to this, which is great. I have the shade Paramour, which is my most worn shade, and this is like a peachy pink. And then I have the shade Ladybug, which is the most beautiful, bright pop of coral. But because it's sheer, it's actually very wearable as a coral orangey shade. So you can see they're thin, they're melty. They're not as thick on the lips as, say, the Lip Chic from Chantecaille, but they're also not waxy. Like they're not waxy like the Gucci sheer lipstick. They're just that right in between. They're moisturizing, they fill in the lip line, they leave your lips really comfortable. There's still a sheerness to them, so they look natural on the lips. It's not like a full pigment lipstick, but they're not so melty that they slide around on the lips. They don't do that at all. They actually stay put. It's a perfect sheer lip formula as far as I'm concerned. Lastly, I'm going to talk about the skincare, and these are relatively new releases. These both came out last year. It's their foray into skincare. So it's the Hinoki Facial Mist and the Hinoki Cleansing Oil. I talked about the facial mist in my 2023 beauty favorites. For me, this is more of an experience product. It's hydrating, but it's not greasy and it's not heavy. So for me, as someone with oily combo skin, I like a facial mist, but I don't want it to leave a film on my skin. I just want it to revitalize the skin without leaving greasiness behind. And this is perfect for that. It also has a really, really refined mister. So nice. And both of these smell like Hinoki, so it has that beautiful wood scent. It's a clean wood scent. It's not too heavy. And it's just a really nice like pick-me-up. The cleansing oil, I actually have one going in my bathroom right now. This is a new one that I haven't opened yet. This is $90, and I should mention that the facial mist is 45 milliliters, 1.52 ounces, and the cleansing oil is 4.87 ounces, so generous size, 144 milliliters. The cleansing oil is also so nice. It's not too thick of an oil. It really breaks down makeup, it breaks down waterproof makeup, it breaks down SPF, and I like that it gives you time to emulsify, it turns milky, but it rinses clean. And that's really important to me with cleansing oils and balms because I am so congestion prone. I don't want anything that's going to leave behind any emollients on my skin. And this is beautiful for that. However, it's also not like it's stripping. It actually feels like it's giving my skin some plumpness and hydration, but it does actually rinse clean. So my final thoughts and also final recommendations. To me, the top products in the line are the powder cheek products, powder eyeshadows, the Noir, and the Noir lash tint. To me, those are the best 3 products from SURRATT. Oh, and the Dewdrop foundation. Okay, top 4 products. Sorry, I'm kind of cheating. But to me, those are the most special products. I think if you're going to start anywhere, those are a great place to start. I also love the lip sleeks, but I think there are so many beautiful sheer lipstick formulas. It's not necessarily unique, though I do love it. Those other products are so unique and specific to the SURRATT line. So that concludes the review. I hope you guys found this helpful. If you have any questions, anything I didn't get to, please let me know in the comments. Again, I have everything linked below. If it was your first time here, then I would love for you to subscribe. If you also are similarly detail oriented, you love getting into it with beauty and beauty culture at large. I do have a few other brand reviews in the works. Again, these take more time, but in the pipeline, I'm thinking about Tower 28, Summer Fridays, Rose Inc. possibly. So that's what I'm working on. But if there's anything else you want to see from me brand review wise, then of course let me know because I'm always open. And because these take effort, I want them to be useful and interesting to you guys. So let me know. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.